From the dojo to the octagon, this is Budocast, your source for the latest in martial arts news, culture, and competition. From breaking fight results to evolving techniques, we cover it all. Let's get into it.
Yeah, it's really fantastic to be back, especially looking at the massive stack of material we have to sort through today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I want you to imagine staring across a steel cage at a guy whose leg you just severely compromised.
Yeah.
You know, you point directly at the canvas, taunting him.
Right.
You have him trapped, his mobility is completely gone, and he's visibly wincing in pain. You lunge forward to finish the job, and a fraction of a second later, you're waking up on your back, staring at the arena lights, realizing you just lost the world championship.
Yeah, that specific scenario, it sounds like some sort of cinematic fever dream, but it's actually precisely the reality we witnessed just days ago. It's insane. So welcome to a very special, wide-ranging deep dive into the current state of global martial arts. We're unpacking the brutal realities of modern combat, the crushing psychological weight of hometown expectations, and, the ancient roots that birthed these techniques in the first place.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are pulling from the official UFC live updates of the incredibly volatile UFC 327 down in Miami, plus an in-depth preview of the upcoming UFC Fight Night in Winnipeg, and this really fascinating cultural dispatch from DT News out in Vietnam.
Yeah, that last one is super interesting.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the sheer unpredictability of what went down at the Kaseya Center. We have to talk about that vacant light heavyweight title, Jiri Prochazka versus Carlos Ulberg.
Right. So to set the table here, we really need to understand the physical and kind of the political landscape of the 205-pound division.
Mm-hmm.
Because Alex Pereira vacating the belt to move up to heavyweight, well, it created a massive power vacuum. So Jiri Prochazka, who is just this absolute tempest of unorthodox movement, right? A completely wild movement.
Exactly. The former champion steps in to reclaim his throne. And facing him is Carlos Ulberg, this highly credentialed former kickboxer who has just been, tearing through the division.
And man, from the opening bell, there was this palpable tension, like no glove touch.
Yeah, none.
Ulberg immediately starts throwing these thudding, agonizing leg kicks. And I want to pause here for a second because people hear leg kick and they kind of think of, I don't know, a playground shin kick.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about what is actually happening physiologically when a pro fighter drives his shin into another man's thigh?
Oh, it is a devastating accumulation of trauma. I mean, when a fighter throws a low kick, they are typically targeting the sciatic nerve or the peroneal nerve, which wraps around the outside of the calf and the knee.
Clearly.
Yeah. They are driving the densest bone in the human body, the tibia, directly into muscle tissue and nerve bundles.
Just bone on muscle.
Right. And the impact literally crushes the muscle fibers against the femur. It causes immediate microhemorrhaging, swelling, and most importantly, it short-circuits the electrical signals from the brain to the lower leg.
So the leg just physically stops responding to commands.
Exactly. It just dies.
And we saw that happen to Ulberg. Well, Ulberg was the one throwing the kicks initially, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then Prochazka started returning fire and specifically targeting Ulberg's leg.
Yeah, he flipped the script.
He did. It got to the point where Ulberg's mobility was completely shot. Prochazka recognized this, backed him up against the fence, and just started bouncing, like pointing at the ground, actively mocking Ulberg's inability to move.
What's fascinating here is the psychological trap that Prochazka fell into, and how Ulberg brilliantly adapted to his own physical degradation.
How so?
Well, Prochazka saw a wounded animal, When a fighter realizes their opponent cannot retreat, their aggression naturally spikes.
Because they feel safe.
Exactly. They think the danger is mitigated because the opponent can't, generate power from the ground up or escape laterally.
But Ulberg didn't panic at all. I mean, he's backed against the cage, clearly in immense pain. Prochazka darts in, overcommitting because he thinks Ulberg is just a stationary target.
Right.
And Ulberg slips the strike and lands this catastrophic left hook. Prochazka goes down, unconscious, at 3.45 of the first round. I'm just trying to understand how Ulberg generated knockout power with a totally dead leg.
So think of it like a coiled spring, or like a heavy artillery cannon.
Okay.
If you put a cannon on wheels, firing it causes it to roll backward. You lose a ton of kinetic energy to the recoil.
Right, that makes sense.
But if you bolt that cannon directly to the floor, all the explosive force goes directly out of the barrel. Because Ulberg's leg was compromised, his natural instinct to retreat or bounce, it was just gone. Yeah, he was forced to root his feet firmly into the canvas. So when Prochazka lunged forward, essentially running right onto the punch, Olberg used that firm, grounded base to pivot his hips and transfer every ounce of his upper body mass into that left hook.
So the injury, ironically, created the absolute perfect biomechanical conditions for a counterstrike, assuming he had the composure to wait for the exact millimeter of a mistake.
Precisely. I mean, Olberg weaponized his lack of mobility. It was just a staggering display of composure under extreme physical duress.
It is mind-blowing. Now, if that fight was a study in precision and trap setting, the heavyweight bout between Josh Hokit and Curtis Blaydes was the exact opposite.
Oh, man. Yeah.
It was a chaotic, beautiful disaster.
It was an all-time heavyweight thriller that completely defied the normal physiology of men that size.
Okay, I really have to paint this picture for you listening at home. The bell rings for round one. Hokit doesn't feel out the distance. He literally sprints across the cage, swinging absolute haymakers.
Just zero hesitation.
Zero. And Blaydes, who is this phenomenal wrestler, instinctively drops for a single leg takedown. Hokit sprawls, stuffs the takedown, and while they are locked up, Hokit looks at Blaydes and flips him the middle finger.
Yeah.
And that was just the first 30 seconds.
The absolute audacity to burn energy on a gesture like that in a heavyweight fight, it's staggering.
And it just kept escalating. Hokit knocks Blaydes back, then Blaydes fires back with these heavy uppercuts. Hokit gets busted open. Blaydes hits him so hard that Hokit's mouthpiece goes flying across the octagon.
Just flies out.
Yeah, and Hokit just smiles, spits blood, and flips him off again. They fall like this for 15 straight minutes, with Hokit ultimately winning a 29-28 unanimous decision. But my main question is just how?
The great question.
I mean, I've gone up a flight of stairs too fast and felt my chest burning.
Yeah.
How do two men weighing over 250 pounds throw maximum effort punches for 15 minutes without their hearts actually exploding?
So to understand the sheer absurdity of this, we really have to look at how the body processes energy. When a heavy athlete throws a power punch, they are utilizing the anaerobic energy system. This system provides explosive power, but produces a byproduct called lactic acid.
Right.
And the heavier the limbs, the more muscle mass recruited. Well, the faster that lactic acid builds up.
That's the burning sensation that makes your muscles physically seize up, right?
Exactly. It lowers the pH level in the muscle tissue, which basically prevents the muscle fibers from contracting efficiently. In a typical heavyweight fight, a single minute of wild swinging leads to catastrophic oxygen debt.
They just gas out completely.
Yeah, the fighters end up leaning on each other against the fence because their arms literally feel like they're filled with wet cement. But Hokit and Blaydes pushed into this bizarre physiological territory.
They really did.
They were relying entirely on adrenaline to override the neurological signals screaming at them to stop. The heart is pumping at maximum capacity, trying to flush the lactate. The lungs are desperately pulling in oxygen. For them to maintain output working the jab, throwing short elbows in the clinch, shooting takedowns right through the final horn, it speaks to an almost psychotic level of cardiovascular conditioning and sheer willpower.
It's the closest thing to a modern gladiatorial spectacle. Now, we saw a lot of violence in Miami, obviously, but we also saw something incredibly rare. A perfect ending.
Yeah, you don't see those often.
Cub Swanson fought Nate Landwehr, and we so rarely get to see a fighter author their own final chapter in this sport.
The grim reality of combat sports is that the sport almost always retires the fighter, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's sad but true.
Reflexes slow down by fractions of a second. The chin deteriorates. Veterans usually end up as stepping stones for younger, faster prospects, going out on their shields while looking up at the arena lights.
But Swanson completely refused that narrative. He is fighting Nate the Train Landwehr, a guy whose entire reputation is built on an insane, suffocating forward pressure that breaks people mentally.
That's his whole game.
Right. Landwehr comes out doing exactly that, pushing the pace, trying to back Swanson against the fence to unleash combinations. But Swanson looked, I don't know, he just looked peaceful.
That is the veteran composure we always talk about. A younger fighter might have panicked under Landwehr's pressure, burning precious energy trying to circle away or getting drawn into a messy brawl.
Which is what Landwehr wants.
Exactly. But Swanson stayed in the pocket, managing the distance with these tiny micro movements.
And the finish was just poetry. Swanson lands this pinpoint left hand that drops Landwehr. Landwehr scrambles up, clearly rocked, trying to get his bearings. And, a lot of fighters would smell blood and rush in wildly, throwing caution to the wind to secure the finish.
Which often leads to them getting caught by a desperation counterpunch or just blowing their gas tank and letting the opponent recover.
Right, but Swanson doesn't do that. He takes a breath, he takes a half step back, finds his angle, and throws a flawless right hand that puts Landwehr down hard.
Just a beautiful shot.
And then, instead of diving on him for ground and pound, Swanson just stands there. He drops his hands to his waist, looks at Landwehr struggling to regain consciousness, and literally walks away before the referee even steps in to wave it off at 4.06 of the first round.
The iconic walk-off knockout.
It's so rare.
It is, and it requires an incredible understanding of kinetic energy transfer. Swanson knew the exact amount of force he had generated. He felt the connection on Landwehr's jaw, and his brain instantly calculated that the impact was sufficient to temporarily short-circuit his opponent's nervous system.
Wow.
To have the presence of mind in your final fight after a grueling 20-year career, to confidently turn your back and walk away into retirement, I mean, it is a cinematic, picture-perfect swan song.
It really was beautiful to watch. Now, we need to dive into some of the other mechanics we saw on this card because the variety of techniques on display was a great reminder of why this is called mixed martial arts. I want to talk about Paulo Costa's fight against Azamat Murzakanov. Costa won via TKO in the third round, but he did it by systematically dismantling Murzakanov's body. What is the strategy behind investing in body kicks early in a fight?
Well, it is about destroying the foundation of the house rather than aiming for the roof.
Oh, I like that.
The head is a moving target. It is designed to evade. The torso is much larger and much harder to protect while throwing strikes. When Costa throws those brutal roundhouse kicks to the midsection, he is specifically targeting the liver, which sits just under the rib cage on the right side of the body.
And the liver is highly vascular, right? It's just filled with blood.
Oh, it is the largest internal organ, completely engorged with blood and surrounded by a dense web of nerves, including the vagus nerve.
Okay.
So when a shin connects with the liver, it causes a massive involuntary physiological cascade. The vagus nerve is violently stimulated, which causes immediate vasodilation. Basically, the blood vessels widen drastically.
Meaning a drop in blood pressure.
Yes, the fighter's blood pressure plummets instantly. The brain senses this drop and sends an emergency signal to the body to essentially shut down and go horizontal to restore blood flow to the brain.
So it's not just that it hurts. The body is literally overriding the fighter's conscious will to keep standing.
Precisely. I mean, you can have the toughest chin in the world, but you cannot tough out a severe drop in blood pressure.
That makes total sense.
Murzakanov was tough. He actually cracked Costa with some heavy left hands in the second round. But the cumulative effect of those body strikes sapped the oxygen from his muscles and slowed his reaction time.
And then the finish came.
Right. By the third round, his hands naturally dropped to protect his aching ribs. Costa recognized the guard had lowered, feinted low, and threw a head kick that found an exposed target, dropping him for the finish. It was a brilliantly executed, long-term physiological dismantling.
Incredible. We also had several grappling clinics on this card. Tatiana Suarez remained undefeated by handing Lupi Godinez her first stoppage loss.
Yeah, that was dominant.
Suarez gets the takedown, transitions to the back, and secures the rear naked choke. And Mateusz Gamrot did something similar to Esteban Rybovic's, but with an arm triangle.
A very technical finish by Gamrot.
I'm looking at the notes, and it says Gamrot took him down, got to a mounted position, locked in the choke, and then intentionally stepped off to the side to finish it. Why would he give up the mount, which is arguably the most dominant position, to finish from the side?
It comes down to the geometry of human leverage. An arm triangle, like a rear naked choke, is a blood choke, not an air choke.
Okay, so going for the arteries again.
Yes, you are trying to compress the carotid arteries on both sides of the neck to interrupt blood flow to the brain, which causes syncope or fainting in about 4 to 6 seconds.
Right. In a rear naked choke, your bicep presses one artery and your forearm presses the other.
Exactly. But in an arm triangle, the attacker is using their own bicep to compress one side of the opponent's neck while trapping the opponent's own shoulder and driving it into the opposite side of their neck.
I see.
If Gamrot stays in the full mount, his weight is bearing down directly on Rybovic's chest. But to finish the arm triangle efficiently, you need lateral pressure. You need to squeeze the neck sideways like a nutcracker.
So stepping off changes the angle.
Completely. By stepping off to the side, Gamrot completely changes the angle of his body weight. He can drive his hips into the floor and use his entire body to push his shoulder horizontally into Rybovic's trapped arm, sealing the blood flow with terrifying efficiency.
That makes perfect sense. He's trading vertical dominance for horizontal crushing pressure.
Well said.
And speaking of crushing pressure, Vicente Luque did exactly that to Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum was looking incredibly sharp on his feet, landing crisp combinations.
Yeah.
But he gets clipped, tries to scramble, and instantly Luque traps him in his signature Darce choke.
Yeah, the Darce choke, named after the grappler Joe Darce, who popularized it. It is a profoundly punishing technique. It is essentially an inverted arm triangle.
Oh, interesting.
Luque threads his arm under Gastelum's armpit, across his chest, and behind his neck, locking his hands together. He then drops his weight to compress the trapped shoulder into the neck.
The speed at which Luque secured it was terrifying. Gastelum realized he was trapped and tapped almost immediately.
When a specialist like Luque gets his arms locked in that configuration, the constriction is so immediate and intense that panic sets in. It is a suffocating, claustrophobic submission.
And not everything on this card was a beautiful display of technique. We had 2 fights marred by severe eye pokes.
Yeah, those were rough to watch.
Charles Jourdain fought a bloody war with Francisco Prado. Prado sliced Jourdain open with an elbow early, but later in the fight, Prado delivered a poke so deep the notes say his finger appeared to hook the inside of Jourdain's ocular cavity.
It's just gruesome.
And Chris Padilla's fight against Markel Medeiros featured multiple eye pokes, resulting in a point deduction and ultimately a majority draw. Beyond the obvious pain, how does an eye poke fundamentally alter a fighter's ability to compete?
It entirely fractures their perception of reality inside the cage.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Humans rely on binocular vision to gauge distance and speed. Your brain uses the slightly different images from both eyes to create depth perception. When one eye is compromised, either swollen shut, tearing profusely, or actually damaged, you lose that three-dimensional mapping.
So you are basically guessing how far away the opponent's fist is.
Yes. A punch that looks like it is 2 feet away might actually be inches from your chin. You start overreacting to feints because you can't accurately track the trajectory of limbs.
That's a huge disadvantage.
Furthermore, the defensive mechanics of boxing and MMA rely heavily on peripheral vision. If your left eye is compromised, you physically cannot see a right hook coming until it makes contact. It forces a fighter to become overly defensive, completely altering the tactical landscape of the bout.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. Now, I want to challenge you on one specific fight that happened in Miami.
Okay, let's hear it.
We just spent 20 minutes talking about all this dynamic action, walk-off knockouts, blood, and complex submissions. The Casillas Center crowd was electric. But then Dominic Reyes steps into the cage with Johnny Walker.
Ah, yes.
Both of these men are massive, explosive athletes with highlight reels full of devastating viral knockouts. Yet, for 15 minutes, the crowd aggressively chanted, "This is boring."
They did.
They basically stared at each other. Why did a fight between 2 known killers turn into a complete stalemate?
This is a classic study in the psychology of risk aversion and game theory.
Game theory.
Yeah. In economics, there is a concept called the Nash equilibrium, where no player can benefit by changing strategies while the other players keep theirs unchanged. In combat sports, when you have 2 highly volatile strikers who deeply respect and perhaps fear the other's knockout power, you often reach a violent stalemate.
Because whoever acts first is exposing themselves to the counterstrike.
Precisely. Walker was fighting entirely on the outside perimeter of the cage. He was throwing single, non-committal calf kicks, refusing to enter the pocket where combinations happen.
And Reyes was just mirroring that.
Right. Reyes would throw a single front kick or an occasional left hand, but he refused to step heavily into his punches because he knew Walker was coiled, waiting for that exact moment.
So they were paralyzing each other with the mere threat of what they could do rather than actually doing it.
The threat of action became a deterrent to the action itself. The crowd gets restless because they see low output, but inside that octagon, the tension is suffocating.
I bet.
The hesitation is born of extreme tactical caution. If Reyes throws a combination and leaves his chin exposed for a millimeter, Walker separates him from his consciousness. It resulted in a very low-volume, forgettable split decision win for Reyes, but it perfectly illustrates how extreme power can sometimes neutralize a fight.
That is a fascinating way to look at a boring fight. It's not a lack of skill. It's an overabundance of caution born from lethal capabilities.
Exactly.
Before we dive deeper, shout out to our sponsors. First up, Elite Sports, leaders in premium fightwear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got gear built to move with you. Check them out at elitesports.com. And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They are currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. And if you've got a story, news tip, or question, send it to us at budocast.com. So from the humid, volatile aftermath of Florida, we are completely shifting our focus. We are moving from a card defined by shocking finishes to a card defined by immense psychological pressure.
Yes, we are heading to the Great Fight North. We have an in-depth preview of the upcoming UFC Fight Night on April 18th, 2026.
I'm really looking forward to this one. The UFC is returning to Winnipeg, Manitoba at the Canada Life Centre. It has been over 8 years since the Octagon was set up in Winnipeg, and the matchmakers have stacked this card with an astounding 9 Canadian fighters.
Which fundamentally shifts the atmospheric pressure of the entire event. A hometown crowd is a vastly different beast than a neutral arena.
So what does this all mean for the main event? We have Mike Malott, the face of Canadian MMA right now, leading the Maple Leaf Militia against the legendary veteran Gilbert Burns.
Such a tough fight.
I try to put myself in Malott's shoes, and the anxiety seems crushing. The last time Malott had a spotlight this bright in his home country was UFC 297 in Toronto against Neil Magny.
A fight that serves as a profound psychological ghost for Malott.
Let's recount that briefly.
Yeah.
Malott was dominating Magny for 2 full rounds. The arena in Toronto was deafening. He looked untouchable.
He really did.
And then, in the final round, his gas tank emptied. Magny dragged him to the mat and finished him with ground and pound. To experience that kind of collapse in front of your family, your friends, and your entire nation. I mean, how does a fighter process that trauma when they're asked to do it all over again in Winnipeg?
It requires immense compartmentalization. When a fighter competes in front of a rabid hometown crowd, their body's endocrine system goes into overdrive.
Yeah, the nerves.
The roar of 15,000 people chanting your name spikes cortisol and adrenaline to massive levels before you even step foot in the cage. If a fighter cannot consciously regulate their breathing and heart rate during that walkout, they experience what is known as an adrenaline dump.
That's when the body processes all that nervous energy at once, and by the time the bell rings, your legs feel like jelly.
Exactly. Your central nervous system crashes. It is highly likely that the pressure in Toronto contributed to Malott's rapid fatigue against Magny.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now, Malott has rebounded incredibly well. He finished Charles Jourdain and outworked Kevin Holland to build a 3-fight winning streak. But stepping back into a Canadian arena to face a man like Gilbert Burns brings all those demons rushing back. Malott isn't just fighting an opponent. He is fighting the memory of his own failure.
And Gilbert Burns is not a man you want to face when you are dealing with psychological demons. I look at the stats, and the casual fan might see that Burns is on a 4-fight losing streak and think he's washed up. Is he just being brought in as a sacrificial lamb for the Canadian hero?
If anyone, including Mike Malott, makes the mistake of viewing Gilbert Burns as a sacrificial lamb, they are going to wake up with a flashlight in their eyes. You have to look at the caliber of men Burns has been losing to.
Right. Let's look at the names. He went to a decision with Bilal Muhammad, who went on to become champion. He lost to Jack Della Maddalena and Sean Brady, both highly ranked absolute killers. And he was caught by Michael Morales, an unbeaten, terrifying prospect.
Burns is the ultimate divisional gatekeeper, but I use that term with the utmost respect.
Sure.
He is a multi-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion with horrifying power in his hands. A veteran like Burns, whose back is against the wall, fighting to maintain his relevance and his livelihood, is extremely dangerous because he relies on deeply ingrained muscle memory and tactical wisdom rather than raw athleticism.
He's not going to rush things.
He doesn't panic, he knows how to weather a storm, and he will eagerly test Malott's cardiovascular and mental endurance in the later rounds.
It's the ultimate crucible.
Yeah.
If Malott can overcome the ghosts of Toronto and put away a grizzled veteran like Burns, he proves he belongs in the elite welterweight conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, this dynamic of rising stars facing desperate veterans is sprinkled throughout this Winnipeg card. Let's look at the co-main event at bantamweight. Kyler Phillips versus the French-Canadian standout, Charles Jourdain.
The bantamweight division, at 135 pounds, requires fighters to operate at a blistering pace. The physics of movement at that weight class means split-second decisions dictate the outcome.
And Phillips is in a tough spot. He trains out of the renowned MMA lab, but he has slipped out of the rankings after tough losses to Rob Font and Vinicius Oliveira. The preview explicitly points out that he still possesses an incredibly elite, well-rounded skill set. I mean, he's beaten guys like Song Yadong, but he is fighting for his job right now.
He is totally cornered. Conversely, Charles Jourdain has found new life since dropping down to bantamweight.
Yeah, he has.
He debuted in Edmonton and did something nobody had ever done. He submitted the incredibly tough Victor Henry. Then he went to Vancouver and choked out Davy Grant in the first round.
Jourdain has this wild, dynamic striking style, but now he's showing a lethal submission game. So you have Phillips, who is technically brilliant but struggling for momentum, stepping into hostile territory against a Canadian who is riding a massive wave of confidence.
This is where we see the contrast in gym philosophies. The MMA lab, where Phillips trains, is known for highly regimented, system-based game plans.
Very structured.
Yeah. They want to dictate the terms of the fight structurally. Jourdain operates with a more fluid, opportunistic chaos. For Jourdain, a win over a respected technician like Phillips proves his resurgence at 135 pounds is legitimate. For Phillips, silencing the Canadian crowd and stopping Jourdain is the only way to claw his way back into the top 15.
The pressure is incredibly high, and it extends to the women's flyweight division as well. We have Jasmine Jasudavicius, the number 7 ranked Canadian, taking on the Brazilian Karine Silva, who is ranked 9th. The preview marks this as the most consequential fight on the card for the actual divisional rankings.
And rightfully so. Jasudavicius was on a dominant 5-fight streak before hitting a wall against the former title challenger Manon Fiorot.
She's a tough out.
She is an absolute grinder. She wants to press you against the fence, make you carry her weight, and exhaust you. But Karine Silva presents a very specific biomechanical puzzle.
The notes describe Silva as a terrifying top-position grappler. What makes her so uniquely dangerous?
Silva is an opportunistic submission specialist who uses heavy top pressure not just to control, but to force panic.
Right.
If Jasudavicius tries to grind her down, she's entering Silva's preferred domain. Silva will gladly accept a takedown if it means she can lock up a limb in transition. It forces Jasudavicius to fight with constant defensive vigilance. You cannot relax for a single second when grappling someone who is actively hunting your joints.
I am looking at the rest of this card, and there are just so many Canadians. Mandel Nallo, a 36-year-old making his UFC debut out of the legendary TriStar gym in Montreal, fighting British veteran Jai Herbert.
That'll be a fun one.
You have Thiago Moises fighting a young prospect in Gage Young. You have Tanner Boser returning to heavyweight against a Turkish newcomer. Is the UFC just stacking the deck to sell tickets at the Canada Life Center, or is there a deeper matchmaking philosophy at play here?
If we connect this to the broader strategy of the promotion, regional cards like this serve as a vital, high-stakes filtration system. Yes, it sells tickets to put local heroes on the poster, but economically and athletically, the UFC uses these environments to stress test their roster.
Stress test? How so?
Think about the ecosystem. They take a regional standout, someone who looks like a world beater on the local circuit, and they throw them into the octagon against a seasoned, gritty veteran like Jai Herbert or Gilbert Burns.
Right.
The UFC wants to see if the prospect folds under the blinding lights of the international broadcast and the weight of their hometown's expectations, or if they rise to the occasion. It separates the true elite from the regional anomalies.
That's a great point.
It is a harsh, sink-or-swim ecosystem designed to identify exactly who has the psychological fortitude to eventually fight for a world title.
It's trial by fire, and the hometown crowd is the fuel. That is a brilliant way to frame what's happening in Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's brutal but effective.
We've spent this time dissecting the absolute pinnacle of modern commercial combat sports. We've talked about lactic acid, adrenaline dumps, the physics of a left hook, and the suffocating mechanics of a Darce choke. But all of these techniques, the footwork, the leverage, the submissions, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. Where do these kinetic concepts actually come from?
To answer that, we must take a massive geographic and temporal leap. We are transitioning from the hyper-commercialized, neon-lit octagon to the ancient cultural origins of human combat.
Yes, we are looking at a dispatch out of Vietnam. In August 2026, the Hanoi Department of Culture and Sports is organizing an enormous international martial arts festival.
It's going to be huge.
Set the scene for us, because the venues they have chosen carry an immense amount of historical weight.
They are hosting this event at the Thang Long Imperial Citadel and the Tran Nan Tung Pedestrian Street. The Imperial Citadel is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. For centuries, it served as the political and military nerve center of ancient Vietnam. It was the absolute heart of regional defense against countless invasions. To host a martial arts festival within those specific ancient stone walls is not just an aesthetic choice. It is a profound symbolic bridge connecting modern physical disciplines to the literal grounds where the ancestors of these arts fought for survival.
It's incredible. And the scale is massive. They are bringing in up to 2,000 martial artists, grandmasters, scholars, and performers from all over the world. The overarching theme is Thang Long's heroic spirit, the essence of Vietnamese martial arts. But as I was reading through the list of disciplines being showcased, I had to stop and reread it.
The lineup is a fascinating anthropological study in itself.
Right. They are featuring traditional Vietnamese martial arts, which is expected, but they're also featuring Vo Vietnam, karate from Japan, Pencak Silat from Indonesia, Taekwondo from Korea, Wushu from China, and explicitly listed right alongside those ancient arts, mixed martial arts.
The inclusion of MMA is a massive cultural watershed moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We just talked about guys flipping each other off and bleeding all over the canvas in Miami.
Yeah, a bit of a contrast.
Right. That is the popular perception of MMA, a violent, modern cage fighting spectacle. But here, a state government's cultural department is deliberately placing MMA on the same historical pedestal as karate and Pencak Silat.
Why? Because they recognize that human anatomy and the physics required to manipulate it have not changed in 1,000 years. MMA is simply the most aggressively pressure-tested modern iteration of the concepts that these traditional arts pioneered.
Leverage is leverage.
Exactly. When Vicente Luque secures a Darce choke, he is utilizing the exact same principles of fulcrums, levers, and arterial compression that ancient grappling systems mapped out centuries ago.
That's so true.
When Carlos Ulberg plants his feet to deliver a counterhook, he's relying on the biomechanical kinetic chains studied by early striking masters in Asia. The festival includes exhibitions of antique weapons, seminars on martial history, and digital interactive experiences meant to trace this exact lineage.
Tracing the roots.
The organizers are formally acknowledging that MMA is not an aberration or a purely modern invention. It is the synthesized, living evolution of the traditional arts.
It proves that these ancient styles aren't just dead museum pieces meant to be looked at behind glass. They are the foundational source code for what we watch on pay-per-view every Saturday night.
Well put.
Karate gave us distance management. Pencak Silat explored intricate sweeping and off-balancing techniques. Vo Vietnam popularized spectacular flying scissor takedowns. MMA just stripped away the ceremonial aspects, put the techniques in a cage, and asked, does this actually work against a resisting opponent?
It is a process of distillation. By bringing MMA fighters and coaches to the Imperial Citadel to interact with traditional grandmasters, the festival is closing the loop. It honors the historical origins while celebrating the modern application.
Right.
It serves a pragmatic purpose for Hanoi, of course, aiming to boost sports tourism and establish the city as a cultural hub, but the philosophical implications are what truly resonate.
It is a beautiful contrast. You have the bleeding edge of the sport fighting for millions of dollars in Florida, and you have martial scholars preserving the geometry of those exact same punches in a UNESCO heritage site in Vietnam. It really is all the exact same pursuit of human physical mastery.
It is. And this raises an important question, something I want you listening to deeply consider as we wrap up. We are seeing these traditional state-sponsored cultural festivals formally embrace MMA as a legitimate branch of the martial arts tree, bringing modern fighters back into contact with ancient single-discipline mastery.
How so?
Well, think about the current generation of UFC athletes. Most of them grew up watching MMA on television. They train MMA as a singular blended sport from the very first day they step on a mat.
Yeah, they don't have a base style.
They don't spend 10 years mastering just karate or just judo before learning how to box. But as global events like the Hanoi Festival foster a deep cultural reconnection between the octagon and the ancient dojos, how will that alter the future of fighting? Will we see a renaissance of deep, single-discipline mastery? Will a future champion travel to Indonesia to spend years studying the esoteric trips and sweeps of Pencak Silat, specifically to find an unpredictable edge in the cage?
Or has the sport evolved so far past its individual roots that the lines will blur entirely until traditional and mixed mean the exact same thing?
Exactly.
That is a phenomenal, heavy concept to chew on. Is the future of the sport actually found by looking hundreds of years into the past? Something for you to keep in mind the next time you see a fighter throw a technique you've never seen before. You have to ask yourself, where did that truly come from? That's it for this episode of Budocast. Thanks for joining us as we break down the latest in martial arts. We'll be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, train hard, stay humble.